About a public mugging where a woman is attacked and no one intervenes, although there's a lot of people standing around looking appalled. Nobody does anything. We wonder what's happened to the idea of community, of fellow feeling, when people don't rush in to help and don't call the cops. Many people here work in or run agencies and know that at closing time, when we lock the door of those agencies, some people are going out to hunger, some people are going out to the streets, some people are going out to self-medicate, and one or more won't be alive the next morning when the door reopens. We're taught as staff that it's good to leave your work at work and go home and not think about what you've left behind. It's not so good for the people who constitute your work. We take refuge often in our powerlessness to affect the circumstances that our clients experience. There's so much we could be doing right at this level, because we cannot just point out government faults. We have to start where we stand. We have to start where we work. Vulnerable, desperate, struggling people whose experiences are pathologized, psychiatrized, criminalized, and infantilized are not valued for their extraordinary accomplishment of still living. And like Linda, still giving, still caring about her peers, and still laughing. Many people knew about how the rules were screwing her. Powerful people, huge institutions, government ministers. A public mugging was going on, and we were all standing around and watching. Hemmed in by rules in housing, supportive housing that often isn't. Rules in their agencies, rules for the dole out of money grudgingly given. Rules and regulations that work for none of us. Keeping people dependent on a worker's goodwill, on dysfunctional systems, ensuring that the need is always great. I've been struck over the last 5 years that when people come to us at Voices from the Street, the first morning they come to us, they're broken, and they're battered, and they're silenced, and they're frightened, and they're dispirited. Is this the best we can do? We spend probably our first 6 days trying to get back that basic belief in our own potential, in our own capabilities. You know, workers can point, I guess, to certificates and diplomas and degrees on the wall. We get to point out Linda Chamberlain, Cheryl Smith. We get our heroes, and our heroes are new to us, ATARs. Yes. Our heroes are new. We recognize our heroes. The system has yet to do so. It's humbling to be in the presence of people that are struggling to speak, to represent their folks, not represent whatever agency they've washed up at. We're kind of defined and diminished by our circumstances. And that's kind of a double blow. When you have to live on nothing, when every day is a struggle, when simply waking up is an act of courage, and then to have people essentially look down their nose at you or treat you like you're a 4-year-old who concentrate on pacification, who concentrate on regulating, on keeping you quiet, on keeping you busy with, I don't know. In the old days, they used to have us crack tiles to make ashtrays. We have very similar things going on in many agencies. So we're judged by the dependency that we're kept in. So that double whammy is what we experience. John has counted all the rules, what, 800? When our folks find their voices, there's something that happens. something that happens to people, they stand up straighter, they talk louder, they fight harder, but also they start looking for work. And that's a reason. In the 5 years of Voices and with the People's Blueprint, which you may have heard of, and that's the folks that are from around the province reviewing, social assistance, reviewing ODSP, looking at how it hurts, looking at the barriers. When our folks are ready to work, they're asked, where are your credentials? We might ask you the same thing. Where is your experience? What gives you the right to exercise these kinds of controls over us? What gives you the right to control whatever scant resources are out there for our good, and yet aren't applied in practical ways to move us out of poverty, move us beyond unemployment and into work? Look at TCHC. For months, for years, while bed bugs were tormenting people, the elderly, the vulnerable, TCHC, which is one of the best employers, they got as one of the best employers, and one of the worst housing. That's an interesting combination, isn't it? But we were told, oh, it doesn't affect people really, it's not bad for their health. Even public health, which should have been a champion, was saying, oh, it doesn't really do harm. And I would invite anybody from THC to move into one of those rooms, move into one of those beds, and say that it doesn't do harm. It doesn't keep people scared and lonely and isolated and shamed. I talk about often, and it's rather terrible that George Bush said it, but somebody wrote it for me, we know this, about the tyranny of the soft tyranny of low expectations. I worked in a drop-in center for 7 years, and by God, it was the best drop-in in the world. We all say that about our separate agencies. It took me being sent by my publisher across Canada, from agency to agency, from Vancouver to St. John's, Newfoundland, to see that every agency was the best agency in the world. Every staff was the proudest. We weren't getting any better. Our lives were not improving. We have powerful allies now that we never had before. We have people who believe in us, but awfully few come from the systems that are in charge of us. I look at Pedro Barada from the Atkinson Foundation, Colette from Metcalf, who believed in us, who fund the work that we're doing, who support, who come to our meetings and talk to our folks and are just as impressed as we are with our abilities. But we're blocked because somehow if we work as equals with staff of agencies, somehow staff feel diminished. Somehow that makes agencies feel less important, less cutting edge. Well, there's a word for that. John, you have a word for that? Thank you. I sent John an email the other day that I was watching The Simpsons. We have to stay in touch with them. And their mad professor was talking about NERD. That stands for not even remotely dorky. So he's thinking of one for policy one. He hasn't really come up with a good one yet. Ian Urquhart at the Star, in charge of the editorial pages, who said, when we sat in his office and said, wouldn't it be nice if our guys wrote our own op-eds instead of, with all due respect, reporters writing about us, that we write about ourselves? And he said, you don't have to convince me. Why is it easier for people to believe in us when they're not receiving a salary for caring for us? I was, as I said, I was a frontline worker. I know some of the dynamics. There's something unhealthy in the power dynamic between worker and client. It's unhealthy, it's unequal, and it's not helping us. Our friends that go on poverty diets for 3 days or a week, that's good, I suppose, but it would be so much better if we could highlight what it's like to take a single on welfare and give him what a frontline worker makes for at least a month and see what kind of change happens in their place. Let's do it, right? We need to tackle the power imbalances. We need to have workers recognize that they do indeed have power. We need to have boards of agencies break themselves open and put us there. We need to challenge the idea that somehow university credentials are enough to get people work. I don't have university credentials. I took English for a year. Not sure why I did that. But I've seen the disrespect. If you go into a drop-in and even look at what space is allocated to workers, what space is allocated to clients, there's something to be said about that. Why don't members have an office right next to the ED, and why do we have EDs anyway in social services? What the hell is that about? We're not Bay Street wannabes, no. And we're not people as workers who want to be professionals, God forbid. What we want to do is help our folks. What we want to do is to be able to make a difference in lives. You know, Linda came, when I was in the hospital for my bypass op, Linda came, and I know it cost her to come because, you know, she didn't have train tickets. And she brought so many goodies. She actually freaked out the staff because she brought this hat that started moving, and was actually purring. The nurses started coming in and scaring one another with this, oh, you can't have that in here. You can't have pets. But, and I remember when, I think it was when you guys graduated from Voices, where people didn't have clothes to wear on their graduation at city council chambers. Linda smuggled everybody into the Queen Street clothing stand, Cambridge clothing store, and everybody was decked out. Everybody was beautiful. But it's not stuff workers think about, because often we don't know. We don't know the realities of our experiences. We think that when people are with us, they're childlike, but we don't think of how much they endure when we're at home, in our beds, safe. So the answer has got to be that we have to use a civil rights term, desegregate staffing of agencies. We have to bring in our folks as equals. We have to give respect for life experience, when that life experience has created people like Linda who don't get bitter, don't get, well, yeah, you get angry, and so you should. Even. Yeah, get even, that's right. These are people who give all of us hope. 5 minutes with Linda is better than a year with a therapist. I hate that.
Yes.
Because we can start to see our own potential. And we can't see that reflected in eyes of those who are in charge of our lives. John stepped up. I mean, this is like 30 years in the bureaucracy, you'd think he'd be really spoiled. John, and you don't even know how he plays a mean guitar. Even breaks the strings when he gets one. But he stepped up, along with Colette, along with Pedro, along with Ian Urquhart, along with many of our friends. And we have some powerful friends, and God bless them. And thank you, John, and thank you, Linda, and thank you, Catherine, but especially thank you, Linda, because it's really hard to put your life out there. She did it on all our behalves, and we've got to be thankful for that. Thank you.